I just had a moment where a single card, divination, brought together three themes into one, like three time frames, three overarching themes into one. And when I realized it, I was like, I kind of experienced the illusion of time for the first time. Where, okay, so I'm gonna start like this. I have like a theme in my life where I'm into really heavy into subconscious understanding, subconscious reflection, subconscious healing, subconscious reprogramming. Okay. And I've been on like an extended journey where I'm like learning to navigate that. And I'm also really into psychology. And, over the last 2, 3 years, I've been thinking a lot about ego and how, like, when I talk about ego, I talk about it from the psychological perspective, not from the way that a lot of people in the spiritual community talk about it. So from the psychological perspective, it's a protection mechanism. And when you learn about it in psychology, you learn about the id, which is like instincts, and one could say like inner child, but I would also think of it as like survival instincts and like the parts of ourselves, the more like primal instinctual parts of ourselves. And then ego is like the protection mechanism. And then super ego is like this higher moral reasoning type thing. Okay. And I got, I did this reading on myself probably like a month ago where I was inquiring about this very strong theme in my life of the like subconscious exploration and things of this nature. And I like to do this thing sometimes when I do readings for myself where I do a card for keep doing, a card for start doing, and a card for stop doing. And to me, it's like symbolic of like it's an easy way to kind of put together the tactics that I've been using and how to like better utilize the tactics that I use to do these different things. And the reading was very much like keep doing subconscious exploration, keep talking about it, keep exploring it, keep these things, but stop doing it from a lens of accusation and like a heavy focus on accountability, and start doing it more from a lens of healing and protecting and like I don't want to say it's not necessarily always gentle, but it is more gentle. But like stop doing it from such a toxically masculine in a sense, like trying to control oneself, trying to fix the wrongs, and start doing it more from an approach of like looking what parts need to be healed and like why the thing happens. So I've been looking at subconscious exploration and subconscious reprogramming very much from a lens of what parts need to be fixed. And it always will take on an accusatory, controlling vibe when done that way. And I just also had this moment recently where I was like, I could not grasp it. And the reason I couldn't grasp it is because I don't have examples of that. Like I don't have examples of parenting and nurturing in a way that is understanding and healing. So like I'm learning, like I'm doing the reparenting stuff and things of this nature. And so I had this moment of realization where I was like, okay, so all these traits that I feel like I need to fix, it's not necessarily about like it's just the approach of fix, control that is harmful. And the approach is better because I had this moment of realization where I was like, okay, the qualities that I don't like in myself, there's a reason for them. And we talk about like mirroring and projection, and we get annoyed with people who are mirroring qualities in ourselves that we don't like. And I realized that like me getting annoyed at qualities in other people that I don't like in myself means that I still don't like them in myself. And understanding why I do those qualities helped me to understand also why other people do them. And so this was like a few days ago. And so then today I was doing like pulling these cards, and I pulled this one, Puppet Master, and it talks about the ego. This is supposed to be representative of the ego. And it talks about how the ego is the mediator between the id and the superego. And as it was explaining this, even though I've learned about it before, for some reason the way that it was put in the explanation in this book, it like made something click for me. And then I was like, if we take it like the psychological perspective of id being instinctual, wounded parts, often it is wounded parts because it's like the instincts are survival. Like evolutionarily speaking, our instincts are usually survival based. So it's often wounded parts, inner child, things of this nature. And then the superego being like moral reasoning and things of this nature, and the ego being the mediator between the two. And then I looked at it from like a spiritual perspective of So the id would be like your inner child, and the superego would be like your higher self, and or your like higher mind, your spirit. And then the ego would be like this vessel and how this vessel mediates between the inner child or the wounded parts and the higher mind, the higher self, the spirit. And then I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, it just made something click where I was like, so the ego is meant to protect, create coping mechanisms to protect the inner child, the wounded parts, but to also honor the higher self, the spirit. And like, I feel like a lot of the subconscious reprogramming journey and the subconscious healing journey is like to find ways to like work with ways to feasibly, efficiently, and in like a healing manner be able to protect and nurture the id, the inner child, the wounded parts, the survival instincts. So to be able to protect and nurture them, but to also keep in line with the higher self, the spirit, the higher mind, the moral reasoning, the superego. And I think I'm coming to the terms that we have such a shamey, like in the spiritual community, there is just an inherent undertone of shame for the id, survival instincts, wounded parts, etc., and such a like pedestalization of like the higher self and the higher mind and like our true spiritual nature. But it's like I almost feel like a lot of my personal out of balance is the pedestalization of the superego, because there's also something with cognitive dissonance there, which is like cognitive dissonance is when you believe morally one way but you instinctually feel another way, and so it creates this cognitive dissonance and oftentimes shame and guilt within oneself. But the pedestalization in the spiritual community of like the higher mind or the higher perspective tends to lead to the demonization of, people even call it lower mind sometimes, and I even think that's like, it rubs me the wrong way. Not that I don't fall prey to that type of thinking myself, but the pedestalization of like the higher self, the higher mind, the super ego leads to the ego being out of balance and like trying to control and belittle and demean the id. I don't know, I feel like I have to think about it more, but this has been a really juicy, just like one card. I pulled one card and was like, it just put together all these, it like glued together all these pieces for me. It was pretty cool.